worn out donkey and no dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials and the Millennial. Joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer on the other side of the camera. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Mark and the Millennials, which we are calling Worn Out Donkey. And that worn out donkey, of course, would be the Democrats in general, because they lack any kind of vision for the United States of America. They are not aspirational, and they are just generally trying to, I think, make America a second-rate, perhaps even a third-rate power. But we're going to get to that in a minute. First up, ladies and gentlemen, before we get to the worn-out donkey, I wanted to talk to you about, and this isn't a commercial, by the way. I wanted to talk to you about American Express. No, it's not a commercial. This is about an actual conversation that I had with American Express yesterday, and I wanted to share this conversation with you. So my wife and I went to a wedding in North Carolina. We drove to North Carolina, and we decided to go to a wedding of a very good friend and really enjoyed ourselves. And while there, a couple of times I didn't feel like bringing my bulky wallet. You know how your wallet, especially guys, your wallet just seems to get fatter and fatter, not because there's money in it, but because you keep adding cards. And in my case, or even gift cards, add a couple of gift cards to a wallet, forget it. The wallet, you just can't put it anywhere. So I was wearing a jacket and tie for the wedding, and I'm like, you know what? I don't feel like carrying this daggone wallet. So I left it in my car, hid it, of course, and took out my American Express credit card and put it in my pocket. And anyway, on the way home, when I finally got home, we realized, oh, well, I guess I lost my American Express credit card. I need to order another one. Maybe that's why you have a wallet, because you probably never forget your wallet. In any event, I ended up finding the credit card later, but it was too late because I had already ordered a replacement. So I order a replacement card from American Express. And when I do so, I decide to call, of course, because it's important. You want to call because you're kind of concerned that you've lost your credit card. I knew no one stole it in this particular case, but you never know at the same time. So you don't know, you don't think anyone's stolen it, but then there's always that slightly part of your brain that's saying, well, what if someone does? I'm going to be in big trouble. So I called American Express, said, look, I can't locate it. I don't think it's stolen, but I better get another credit card. And the lady says, well, we've identified you by your phone number, because I guess they have caller ID when you call. And I guess that is a security feature, which makes sense. But we need the last four of your social. So I gave the last four of my social. And the lady goes, oh, okay, very good. So it's confirmed. How do I address you? And I said, excuse me? She goes, well, how do I address you? I said, well, ma'am, my name is on the credit card. And that's how you address me, because that's why my name is on the credit card. And she goes, but how do you want me to address you? And I said, look, I'm calling you because I've lost my card. And there's that side of me, the small slither that thinks there's a possibility, ever so slight, that maybe since I've misplaced it, someone else has gotten a hold of it and could potentially use it. Therefore, I want to cancel it and order another card. You have all of my information in front of you. Why do you need to know how to address me? Address me by my name, is what I said to the lady, right? Now, with all fairness to this young lady who was on the phone with me, she's following protocols of American Express. And she said that. She said, well, sir, I'm just following the protocols of American Express. I said, I know that. But you have my name, my address, my social, my birth date, everything right in front of you on a screen. How can you not know how to address me? My name is on the card. That's how you address the person when they call, if you want to address them at all. And she's like, well, I just need to get past this point before I can move forward. I said, no. We're way past this point. let's forget about this utter nonsense. This is what I told her. So let's forget about this utter nonsense that American Express has decided to engage in, namely to ask people how they want to be addressed, because obviously they're trying to appease the, 1/100th% of the population, a tiny, tiny little slither of the population that says, you called me by my first name, Mark. How dare you? I'm offended. I must be referred to as there or they. Or what are some of the other pronouns, Chris, these days? I mean, I know Mr. and Mrs., but aren't there like endless amounts of pronouns you could be called?
I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard lots of them over the years, of course, that the crazies on the left are using. But I just said to this lady who's just doing her job, and I know that American Express, but nonetheless, American Express is asking people, how do you want to be addressed? And it's just like, look, I lost my credit card. I need to cancel it, and I need to have a replacement card. How I would like to be addressed is clear because you have all the information in your system, and it is not relevant to anything. Because if I wanted to change the way I wanted to be addressed, then I presume I could change the name on my credit card, because in some states, by the way, you can actually go down to your local Bureau of Records or whatever they call it in your particular state, and you can have your name changed on your birth certificate. You can have your name changed on your birth certificate. So that is if you want to identify as another gender or no gender, because the Democrats believe that there are more than two genders. And so American Express has bought this entire nonsense of gender identity and asking people how they want to be addressed. And I was just so upset because I'm just like, I'm just calling because I want my card replaced. Why is this woke nonsense involved in credit card processing and issuing replacement cards and me paying my bill? Who cares? It's a financial company and there's a financial transaction. I swipe my credit card. The vendor pays a fee to the credit card company for the right to be able to accept that card. As long as I pay my credit card in full each month by the statement date, I'm not charged anything. It's a great deal for the credit card user if they're disciplined and use the credit card in that way. I don't want them involved in this other part of stuff that is non-financial. Yet this is where we are today in America. And so, as I said, this was not an advertisement for an American Express. It's kind of the opposite. And unlike everybody else in the country who's on the left, obviously I'm not, but unlike everyone who's on the left, they would probably engage in cancel culture of American Express credit cards if they had an American Express credit card, if indeed the credit card company didn't ask people, how would you like to be addressed? And this is the part of cancel culture that I think is just insane, right? Because, yes, I would agree with the right-minded people out there in America that it's absurd for companies to be involved in this stuff. But I think maybe the answer is to, rather than just outright cancel the credit card, because American Express has become kind of like a utility in many respects, especially if you travel, maybe the answer is just to have a conversation with the agent and say, I'm sorry, what do you mean, like, how do I want to be addressed? I mean, what are the options? And do the options in any way impact what is on my credit card in terms of, like how you identify me? And then just have that conversation, in which case their agents who have to probably answer, 100 calls a day in order to be considered efficient and keep their job. In this case, you're burning through agents by just asking them 100 questions and then just finally making American Express understand how stupid this is. Just absolutely stupid. So just when you think, ladies and gentlemen, that the left hasn't made any more progress with respect to big corporations in America and that they've realized that this election is set kind of in stone, where Republicans are going to sweep across the country so many different elections, including very important races. Here you have an American Express that isn't getting the message at all. So next time you call American Express for your American Express credit card, may I just suggest that you ask the people that are there, that answer the phone at least, just play games with them about this whole pronoun nonsense, because it really is utter nonsense. You have a given name, that is your name. And if you have a nickname, the old days, right, Chris? The nickname was, instead of Christopher, it was Chris. Instead of Marcus, maybe it was Mark or something like that. But now it's hey they, how are you doing? How's there over there? So anyway, that's my story about American Express, and I had to share it. So next up, podcast listeners, the worn out donkey. We're calling the podcast the worn out donkey because the Democrats really don't have any policy options to offer the American people. They can't even defend their policy decisions of the past couple of years, when they've been in complete control of the United States House of Representatives, the United States Senate, and of course, the presidency. Yet they refuse to go to debates, and we have spoken in past podcasts how the Democrats are terrified of debating. In fact, they have held off their debates until early voting has already started, which early voting, ladies and gentlemen, has already started in many, many states. And the Democrats are finally saying, well, now that early voting has started and people can't change their votes, now I'm willing to actually debate you, because it's too late for people to change their votes after they hear my awful debate performance. And we know the Democrats are going to have an awful debate performance because they cannot defend the indefensible policies that they have pursued and passed for the past 2 years. So in Florida, I believe early voting has begun, or it is about to begin. And nonetheless, Charlie Crist, who's currently a congressman, he debated the current governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. And that debate just took place yesterday. Fascinating debate. It's a fascinating debate because it gives you, this debate provides to the American people what a true presidential candidate looks like in 2024, except that it's 2022. And DeSantis never, you know how Republicans so often, they will say things when they are at a Lincoln-Reagan dinner and they have their base in front of them. But then when they govern, or when they're speaking to the media, or when they are in a debate, they really don't talk about those things because they never intended to ever push forward their policies anyway. Common sense policies I'm talking about. Common sense conservative policies. Well, not DeSantis. I mean, DeSantis is the guy who is using his leverage and his bully pulpit as governor to get across all of the important common sense conservative messages and policies, and he doesn't run away from them. In fact, he doubles down on them, and he illustrates and illuminates to the American people how incredibly bankrupt and bereft of any kind of ideas the Democrat Party has. So we have a series of 5 clips for you, ladies and gentlemen, from this debate. Spent a lot of time pulling these individual clips out because they really deal with the specific issues of the day, the issues of the day that are important in many states. Of course, inflation, the economy, but also education, lockdowns, COVID vax, and the constantly changing landscape of the Democrat Party, where they want to divide people, and they find ways of creating tribes, the Democrats too. You know, you've got the black tribe and the white tribe and the Hispanic tribe, and the Democrats try to create all these tribes to have them war with one another so that they never look at themselves as being an American. They never try to actually bring people together. So DeSantis comes right out and hits Crist with his incredible debating style because it's just really blunt and straightforward. And I really think this is where most of the American people are now. They just want answers to policies, and they want, the lame politicians of Charlie Crist. By the way, Charlie Crist has been in an office, various offices across his life, for pretty much his entire life. He was a Republican, and then he became a Democrat. I think he changed back and forth like at least one time, maybe twice. So we're calling this the worn out donkey, this series, because good old DeSantis uses this term. I think we should use this term from now on in future debates and in future conversations. You're just a worn out donkey. Can you imagine using that in the Maryland House of Delegates on the floor? Oh my God, you'd be censured, It's like, I'm sorry, what did you say? I said, sometimes the Democrats are just worn out donkeys. I find that offensive. You have broken the protocol and said something that is so offensive. So anyway, we had the first clip, and it's a really pretty fantastic exchange, and here it is.
Well, listen, I know that Charlie's interested in talking about 2024 and Joe Biden, but I just want to make things very, very clear. The only worn-out old donkey I'm looking to put out to pasture is Charlie Crist. And you want to talk about standing up for taxpayers. When Charlie Crist was governor, he ran saying he would not raise taxes. He became governor, and he signed off on the largest increase in taxes and fees in the history of the state of Florida.
That's time,
we
Governor.
just enacted the largest decrease in taxes in the history of Florida.
Thank you, Governor.
So this is important, ladies and gentlemen, because Charlie Crist, while he is a current congressman from Florida, he was also a governor of Florida. And you heard DeSantis basically create and illustrate for people real sharp differences between the two as governors. With DeSantis, as the current governor, he has cut taxes. And with Crist, the first thing he did when he got in as a Democrat, as governor of Florida, he raised taxes across the board, the largest tax increase in Florida's history. And the Democrats couldn't find really a viable candidate that would win statewide in Florida. So they recycled Charlie Crist, who's probably 100 years old and been in office his entire life, never really had an honest job, outside of politics, which, of course, for most people, they would agree it's not honest work when you don't have a real job. And DeSantis basically says he's a worn-out donkey. Now, I'm pretty sure that was kind of a canned response, and it's kind of humorous, but I think it also reminds people a little bit about the fact that with politicians that just stay in office forever, kind of like Steny Hoyer, who's the House Majority Leader, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and Charlie Crist. They're just like worn out donkeys. They're selling us the same stuff they've always sold us, except that now in 2022, we're finally realizing it doesn't work. And by we, I'm talking about people who are the unaffiliated. I think conservatives always knew it didn't work and it was wrong. But I think even some Democrats, a substantial amount of Democrats, maybe as many as 20 to 25% of Democrats, are beginning to realize there's something wrong with their party. So the moderator in this debate, ladies and gentlemen, asks the question of the day. It's a very important question. And we're going to give you the series of answers from the two candidates from this question. The moderator asks the question, about education and so forth, and Crist provides his answer first. This is a really important issue across America because it really goes to school shutdowns. Why were they shut down so long? But not in Florida. And can you imagine the free state of Florida having Charlie Crist, if there's another pandemic? He's going to keep schools shut down because he's bought and paid for by the teachers unions. But I'm going to let you decide. That's why we're going to play these next 4 clips for you. We'll set them up one by one. First up, the moderator is going to ask the question, key question across America. It made the decision in the Virginia gubernatorial race. And Crist's answer. We have the clip, and here it is.
The pandemic and remote learning exposed parents to what was going on in America's classrooms like never before. Disputes over masks and reopening schools had parents across Florida demanding more say in their children's education. Part of your response, Governor, was to sign the Parental Rights in Education Act, which you, Congressman, called a, quote, heinous piece of legislation. Governor DeSantis, the Parental Rights in Education Act and the Stop Woke Act are centerpieces of your agenda for Florida schools. Why? And Congressman, do you believe it's important to educate students in kindergarten through third grade about sexual orientation and gender identity? Congressman, you have 60 seconds.
What I think is important is to educate children on science, math, and history, and true history and fact. Since we're talking about education in Florida, 9,000 teachers and staff have left Florida because of the way he has treated public schools in our state, and it's wrong. We are the third largest state in America, and his administration is paying our teachers 48 out of 50 states. That's embarrassing. We can and we should and we need to do better than that. We need to have a focus on education and not politicize and make political war zones out of our schools. We need to support our schools, support our teachers, have our parents involved. That's absolutely essential. And that's what we need to get back to, is basics, instead of having all these cultural and political wars that Ron loves to do, as I said, because he wants to run for president and he's out of state raising all this money all the time.
So that was Charlie Crist giving his response. It was really a non-response because the question was, Mr. Crist, do you believe that the bill that said that sexual orientation and gender identity ideology, the prohibition of teaching those things in kindergarten to third grade, do you believe, Mr. Crist, that that is a heinous piece of legislation, as you said previously when the bill passed? So in other words, Mr. Crist, do you believe that it's appropriate to teach children from K to third grade sexual orientation and gender identity ideology? And he never answered the question. What he said was the usual nonsense that Democrats always say. We need to support our teachers. We need to support them. Which, of course, in Democrat language is code for we need to support the teachers' unions. And we need to make sure that we dump all of the budget into public education without ever asking for performance measures by anyone. We don't want teacher performance measures. There are no key performance indicators that we should look at. We should just dump the money in. But he never answered the question, Crist, which was, why did you call that piece of legislation a heinous piece of legislation? Well, here's DeSantis's response to that same question. Listen to this clip. Here it is.
I would say when you oppose the Parents' Rights in Education bill, which prevents 6, 7, 8-year-olds from having sexuality, gender ideology injected in their curriculum, you are the one that's waging the culture war. I'm simply defending parents and students because it's inappropriate to have that in elementary school. It's inappropriate to tell a 6-year-old that they were born in the wrong body. It's inappropriate to tell an 8-year-old that they may have been born a girl, but maybe they're really a boy. That's wrong. We need to do the basics. We need to teach them to read, write, add, and subtract. And if we do that, we'll continue to lead in fourth grade reading and fourth grade math like we did in today's NAEP results, which is a great testament to having open schools and a lot of hardworking folks in our school system. I also signed, I'm the father of a 5-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old daughter as well as a 4-year-old son, but my daughters are very athletic, and we signed legislation to protect the right of women athletes, that you should not have someone competing on the men's team for 3 years and then switch to the women's team. Charlie Crist opposed that bill. He said he would have vetoed it. I'm going to protect women's sports in the state of Florida.
So it's interesting, right? Because you have a sitting governor, DeSantis, who's willing to talk about the complicated and difficult issues of the day as they relate to public education in the state of Florida. Namely, should boys be allowed to compete in girls' sports and deny girls the opportunity to not only compete in the sport for their own gender, but also to be able to receive scholarships to colleges and be able to demonstrate their expertise and how good they are in those sports. DeSantis speaks to that plainly and straightforwardly and says, no, boys should not be allowed to play in girls' sports. Ladies and gentlemen, we just saw in North Carolina how a boy on a volleyball team spiked a ball and really injured a girl because of course, Democrats believe there's no difference between the two. There's no biological difference. Biology is not a thing. Well, in North Carolina, we just saw that it is a thing. DeSantis realizes that it is and speaks to it in great detail and in a way that is commonsensical. Crist can't even cover the issue because he's bought and paid for by these people who are the groomers in the Democrat Party who want to teach your children in elementary school about sexual orientation. They can't wait to teach them. I mean, doesn't that tell you right there and then alone how sick they are? And they can't wait to teach them about gender identity so that they can somehow convince your 6 or 7-year-old that they're in the wrong body. I mean, that is not the function of the public school system. It's just not. And DeSantis is even narrowing it down, saying it's not the function of the public school system in elementary school. So he's being very crafted and he's being very specific and narrow with respect to the exceptions, and yet the Democrats, their heads just explode. So Charlie Crist decided to respond to that DeSantis comment. We have that clip, and listen to the old school Democrat playbook. Let me know if you hear all of the Democrat playbook and Charlie Crist's comments right here. Listen, here it is.
There you go again, Ron. It's all about culture wars. It's all about dividing us. I'm a uniter. I think we need to be giving our state a chance to unite again. You love dividing our state. You know, whether it's blacks against whites, whether it's gay against straight, whether it's young versus old. You're making it harder for people to vote in our state. You know, we just started early voting today, and he made it harder to mail in ballots. I have a 90-year-old father, an 88-year-old mother. They love to exercise vote by mail. He's made it harder, along with the Florida legislature. That's anti-democracy.
So there's Charlie Crist, the Democrat, saying he's a uniter. Charlie Crist is saying that Charlie Crist is a uniter, but then proceeds to separate people into tribes. So Charlie Crist says, I'm a uniter. He doesn't like black people. He puts black people against white people. He puts gay people against straight people. He's trying to make it harder for people to vote. I mean, talk about creating tribalism. That's exactly what Crist is doing, rather than just say, hey, you know, I'm pretty sure that when people go to public schools, pretty sure that parents want the final say in the privacy of their homes with their elementary school students when it comes to teaching their elementary school students about, you know, things like sexual orientation and gender ideology. They don't want that covered in elementary school. And so Crist's response is just, oh, well, you know, he's trying to separate everybody. Well, truth is, I'm pretty sure that everybody that I know of and everybody who's reasonably got a decent head on their shoulders would agree that elementary school is not the place for this. So Crist constantly is playing this same old repeating album of black against white, gay, straight, gender, non-conforming against, you know, binary or whatever they're doing these days in the Democrat Party. It's all they have. Was any of that policy related? Was any of that in any way, shape, or form talking about how to make schools more accountable to the students and to the parents? Of course not. None of that advanced the conversation. And DeSantis is advancing the conversation of basically putting parents back in charge, which is really sad that we even need legislation to put parents back in charge, because parents were always in charge. Always. But the fact that we have to codify it? I mean, what the heck? So here's good old Governor DeSantis. He has a response showing us how to debate. We have that clip, and here it is.
I think denying girls and women athletes the right to compete fairly, I think that's divisive. I think it's divisive to rip opportunities away from our girls in the state of Florida. And you want to talk about divisive? The day after Charlie Crist won his primary, he said, anyone that supports the governor, you have hate in your heart and I don't want your vote. Well, think what that means. I'm endorsed by every police group in the state of Florida. I'm endorsed by the firefighters. I'm endorsed by the truckers, the nurse anesthetist, retail federation, farm bureau. The whole cross-section of the state of Florida is backing me. They do not have hate in their hearts because they reject Charlie Crist. They want to keep Florida going and they want to keep Florida free.
So that's Ron DeSantis there, the governor of Florida, talking about, hey, the Democrats say that, that I'm divisive, but meanwhile, they want boys and girls sports. They want to deny girls the opportunity to excel in high school and in college and sports in general and beyond. They're divisive because they're saying that Governor DeSantis had hate in his heart, but meanwhile, he's the guy who is being endorsed by all these different and diverse groups across the state of Florida. So, look, the point, ladies and gentlemen, of having you listen to these clips, and that was the last clip in this series, about the worn-out donkey, the Crist versus DeSantis debate, is because this is how you debate. This is how conservatives should debate. We had you listen to a debate the other day be in Ohio, and it was Ryan versus J.D. Vance. Same thing. Teaching you how to not run away from your principles and not run away from what is important to the conservative movement and just talking about it in a way that is commonsensical, because it is commonsensical. And then you know what always happens? The Democrats reliably will always go back to their teachers' unions. Oh, it's because you don't support teachers. And then you say, well, you know what I do support? I really like the idea of supporting performance. And performance means whether or not there is actual measurable results when each grade is taught, and whether the kids are learning what is supposed to be taught in those particular grades. And then the academics say, oh, that's because you don't like teachers. No. Schools exist for children. That's who they exist for. And this is like the most remarkable conversation that we even have to have, remarkable thing ever, that we even have to have a conversation about whether or not schools exist for students. And now, of course, we're being told that they only exist for one group of people, and that is the teachers' unions. So good job, Governor DeSantis, for the worn-out donkey. So next up, podcast listeners, intimidating Dropbox voters. We have this incredible story and then an incredible 2 clips from Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton's back and tweeting out, of all things, about stealing elections. It's just the most remarkable thing. It's the most remarkable thing how the left throughout history is accusing their opponents of exactly what they have done and or doing. And it's also not helpful in the overall national conversation, because as we've talked about on this program before, we even had an entire podcast dedicated towards it. It would be really easy to fix voter confidence by doing just a few basic things and going back to common sense day of voting, or maybe 7 days of early voting and then the day of voting, and that's it. And you have to show up in person and you have to show your ID. Real easy to fix this. But of course, the Democrats don't want to. They're the ones who created the bedlam that we currently have in the United States of America, starting with the 2020 election. So Hobbs, who's running for governor of Arizona, tries to intimidate Arizona ballot Dropbox watchers. So there's this phenomenon across America, as you guys know, where Dropboxes were instituted in 2020. Suddenly we went from day of voting, then we had month of voting, and then of course, next thing you know, you have Dropboxes. And it's like, well, what is happening here? So there's this whole phenomenon across America where people are getting together and they are deciding that it would make a lot of sense to show up at Dropboxes and have shifts whereby you watch the Dropboxes. And when you watch the drop boxes, you determine whether or not people are putting more than one ballot inside the drop box. And you're recording it, you're taking pictures of the individual's license plates and of the individuals themselves. This is perfectly legal because drop boxes are on public property. There's nothing wrong with monitoring it because this is just like no difference than having election monitors the day of the election or for early voting. So why shouldn't we have monitors at the drop boxes? Well, of course, we shouldn't have drop boxes to begin with. You should be required to vote in person, as we've already said. Well, anyway, Katie Hobbs, the Arizona Secretary of State, may once again be using her position of authority to manipulate election rules in her favor by punishing those who are concerned about election integrity, according to a Washington Post report. The George Soros-backed Hobbs, that's right, she's backed by George Soros, who currently is running for governor against Kari Lake, previously used her office to help secure the 2020 election for the Democrats. This is according to this headline news article, okay? She later waged a full-fledged battle against her own state legislature as it attempted to investigate voting irregularities in Maricopa County. Among her dubious claims was that efforts to verify voter registrations by physically knocking on doors was tantamount to voter intimidation. But conservatives contend that Hobbs's suspicious resistance to election integrity measures speaks volumes about her true intentions. In the aftermath of 2020, concerned citizens are now taking it upon themselves to monitor unmanned ballot boxes where widespread ballot harvesting may have occurred. But some Phoenix area voters complained about being under surveillance while at the ballot drop boxes. So, as you could imagine, Hobbs, is trying to stop this from happening. What is she trying to stop from happening? She's trying to stop people monitoring the drop boxes. No different than having election judges who tend to be volunteers, but certified by the local election boards who show up and watch people as they vote to make sure that they assist them, number one, and also to look for any kind of voting irregularities. But you can't do that at drop boxes, can you? Not according to the Democrats. Because drop boxes, the whole intent of them was to enable irregularities. And now that the Republicans across the country are organizing groups to monitor those drop boxes, that is to say, do nothing more than sit in your car and be within a reasonable distance away of the drop box, maybe 20 feet or 20 yards, close enough so you can see what the person is dropping in the drop box. Somehow the Democrats think that is wrong, that you should not have any kind of monitoring of the drop boxes. It's just a remarkable, remarkable thing that a modern republic, a modern society in 2022 cannot get past this idea of wanting to verify that elections are fair. And it's really hard to do that unless you monitor the drop boxes. Obviously, it'd be much easier if you didn't have the drop box to begin with. And if you insisted upon voting by mail, that you put it through the U.S. Post Office, or that you actually drop it off in person to the election board. But that's not what the Democrats want, of course. They want to completely and utterly make it much more easy for certain people to manipulate the process through ballot harvesting, which we've discussed many times before. So this is what Mrs. Hobbs, who is running for governor of all things in Arizona, is doing. And by the way, she doesn't want to debate her opponent. And we've spoken about this before too. So Hobbs literally is going to run for governor in the state of Arizona, never having had a debate with her opponent because she can't have one. And then we have the Biden administration, who's doing everything he can to buy votes, whether it be through paying off your student debt which is really a transference of the debt from those who owe it to those who don't, to drawing down the oil reserves and the Strategic Petroleum Reserve so as to temporarily lower prices of gasoline. I mean, it's endless what they're willing to do. All of these are post-constitutional problems, right? Because we're living in post-constitutional times where no one seems to be following the Constitution because, oh, no, it doesn't really matter anymore. The president can do whatever he wants to try to buy votes to stay in power. And drop boxes, why vote in person? Why do that? Doesn't make any sense. So Hillary Clinton decides that amongst all this craziness that's going on with the buying of votes by the Democrat Party, of course, in particular, Joe Biden, and trying to expand drop boxes and trying to expand ballot harvesting, Hillary Clinton, what does she do? She's convincing her people on her side of the aisle that is actually the other side that is trying to change the outcome of election and do so illegally. So we have a clip, actually two clips. This is a tweet that she tweeted out. It's almost hard to believe, ladies and gentlemen. It's fascinating that she's back, but it just shows you how badly she wants to be president of the United States. And we have the first of two tweets on this. Here's the first one.
Hello, Indivisibles. I'm here to highlight something that is keeping me up at night. And I know this group really understands what I'm about to say. I know we're all focused on the 2022 midterm elections, and they are incredibly important. But we also have to look ahead, because you know what? Our opponents certainly are. Right-wing extremists already have a plan to literally steal the next presidential election. And they're not making a secret of it. The right-wing controlled Supreme Court may be poised to rule on giving state legislatures, yes, you heard me that correctly, state legislatures the power to overturn presidential elections. Just think, if that happens, the 2024 presidential election could be decided not by the popular vote or even by the anachronistic Electoral College, but by state legislatures, many of them Republican-controlled.
So that's Hillary Clinton, ladies and gentlemen. The same person from the same party who called Republicans insurrectionists. By the way, all MAGA Republicans, insurrectionists, regardless of whether you were in D.C. on January 6th or not in D.C. on January 6th, whether or not you were one of those persons who walked into the Capitol or broke into the Capitol, or whether you were one of those persons who was there January 6th and had nothing to do with that. She's lumping everybody together. And these are the same people, the Democrats, who are saying the Republicans are insurrectionists. And literally, she's talking about the Republicans stealing the election. It's just, I don't understand it. And then she uses this term indivisibles. I mean, it used to be deplorables, what she used to use. But this time it's indivisibles, because apparently this is an organization, which we're going to talk about, by the way, in a minute. But it's Hillary Clinton. And she says that Republicans have a, quote, plan to literally steal the next election. And that how dare those Republicans, or anyone for that matter, have state legislatures have the final say on elections. Folks, it's in the Constitution. That is what state legislatures are supposed to do. Elections are run by the states, each of the individual states. And the state legislatures decide how those elections are run. How long there's early voting, if there even is early voting, whether or not there are drop boxes, whether or not there is voter ID, whether or not there is voting by mail, whether or not there are ways to verify whether the person who put the ballot in the mail actually voted the ballot through signature matches. The states get to decide this. So the Democrats, of course, don't believe in the United States Constitution because they don't believe that the states should decide elections. The Democrats believe they should decide on elections, that Congress should decide, that there should be a single national election, that there ought not be the Electoral College. You want proof of this? Hillary Clinton, the person the Democrat Party believed was the moderate Democrat running for office when she ran against Barack Obama in the primary, listen to this second part of the same tweet in which she says about this entire issue. You won't believe it. Here it is.
But there's also good news in the face of this very real threat to democracy. Indivisible has launched Crush the Coup to make sure we're ready to defend democracy in 2024. They've put together a list of critical races in 6 key states and how you can get involved. Will you support Crush the Coup by donating to Indivisible and state legislature candidates? Each of these races is highly competitive, and your dollars could very well decide the winners and the winner of the next presidential election.
So that's Hillary Clinton believing that you shouldn't have state legislatures run elections, yet she wants you to help her get more people who are Democrats to run and win in state legislatures. She also believes that the Electoral College is an anachronistic system, which is what she said in the first tweet. Think about that. She wants more people to be elected to state legislatures because they don't matter, yet the Electoral College is anachronistic because that's how she lost when she ran for office, through the Electoral College, which we've discussed before in previous podcasts. We probably should certainly spend another podcast on this, maybe even with folks from the Convention of States. The Article 5 Convention of States, which would be states getting together, agreeing to have an Article 5 Convention of States and voting for common sense constitutional amendments that strengthens our American democracy. I think Hillary is realizing that the power, actually, because of the Supreme Court and because of the United States Constitution, you combine those two together, that the power is shifting back to the state legislatures where it should have always been. Power should have rested with the state legislatures and with the people. Hillary's finally realizing that, and I think she's realizing that the Convention of States is actually gaining steam. And since it is gaining steam, it might be well time for more Democrats to start winning in states, because the Convention of States is moving and advancing towards their goal of getting enough states to get together to then call a Convention of States. So what is this organization that she refers to, Hillary Clinton, in her tweet? It's called Crush the Coup, a Threat to Democracy. Well, the organization is actually called Indivisible. And it says, when you pull up the website, "We beat Trump, now let's save democracy." Here's another, right on their first page of their website. "MAGA has a plan to steal the election in 2024. We have to stop them today." Can you imagine? These are the same people that are having January 6th hearings and have been having them for a couple of years, and they're talking about this nonsense. "Defend Democratic majorities and stop MAGA extremism. How to flip the script on MAGA mayhem." You know what? Let's click through that. Let's click through that one. How to flip the extremism. Let me see. It says here, "It's no secret we love guides here at Indivisible. After all, it's how this movement got its start 5 years ago. The guide is a little different, though, and we want to be upfront about that. Over the last several weeks, Indivisible has been working with groups in Pennsylvania and Arizona to pilot some of its work, learn lessons, adjust plans, and offer our best advice to you as your group thinks about the work ahead of November. The guide is a first attempt, so basically it's a guide of how to get people elected. And there isn't enough time to do that tonight, but it just says, who is the guide for? It's for you. If you are already part of an indivisible group, these tactics will help your group build a narrative for both national and local races. In other words, the Democrats don't have policies that they can sell. They want to create a narrative. In other words, they want to lie. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is your modern Democrat Party under Hillary Clinton. I can't say this enough. I can't say this enough about her. She was supposed to have been the moderate choice of the Democrat Party. And this individual still wants to be the Democrat nominee for president. You can just see it in her eyes. And she seems actually sick when you see her. She actually looks to me when she's speaking as someone who's so power crazed and power hungry. She can never be trusted with power, because she's so far left wing that she believes in completely upending the Constitution, getting rid of the Electoral College, getting rid of the purpose of states, and basically having a country that has no differences between any of the regions, and everybody has to live under her autocratic rule. It's just, we'll cover this again, Chris, this Electoral College stuff, because it's extremely important. And good old Hillary Clinton. Let's just play this last tweet. Let's play the first tweet of her one more time, and we'll finish with that to close out Mark and the Millennials. Listen to this.
Hello, Indivisibles. I'm here to highlight something that is keeping me up at night. And I know this group really understands what I'm about to say. I know we're all focused on the 2022 midterm elections, and they are incredibly important. But we also have to look ahead, because you know what? Our opponents certainly are. Right-wing extremists already have a plan to literally steal the next presidential election. And they're not making a secret of it. The right-wing controlled Supreme Court may be poised to rule on giving state legislatures, yes, you heard me that correctly, state legislatures the power to overturn presidential elections. Just think, if that happens, the 2024 presidential election could be decided not by the popular vote or even by the anachronistic Electoral College, but by state legislatures, many of them Republican-controlled.
That's the best the Democrats can offer, is far left, out of control, Hillary Clinton, who looks so power crazed in this video that it is absolutely frightening. She wants to be the king of America. And that's the last word for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Getter, True Social, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.